Episode 1 of The Chosen Season 6 doesn't ease you in. It doesn't give you a moment to settle, to breathe, or to remind yourself that this is just a show. It opens like a door being kicked off its hinges, and the story that falls through is not the one you were expecting. Something has shifted, something fundamental and irreversible. The warmth that carried you through 5 seasons is still there, but it's buried now, pressed down beneath the weight of what's coming. And that weight announces itself in the very first scene. You feel it before you understand it. You sense it before the dialogue even begins. Episode 1 is not an introduction. It's a reckoning. What makes this opening so jarring is how deceptively quiet it starts. There are no grand declarations, no dramatic music swells designed to signal importance. Instead, the episode trusts its own silence. It lets the stillness do the talking. And in that stillness, you begin to realize that the world of the chosen has changed in ways that cannot be undone. The faces you've come to love over 5 seasons look different now. Not older, not wearier in any ordinary sense, but heavier. Like people who have started to understand something they were not ready to understand. Like people who have seen what the road ahead actually looks like and cannot unsee it. The disciples appear in these early moments not as the bold, mission-driven followers you remember, but as men quietly processing the distance between what they believed and what is now becoming real. Their conversations don't feel like dialogue written for television. They feel like the kind of words spoken in low voices when something enormous is approaching and no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. There is fear underneath the surface of every exchange, not the fear of danger, but the deeper fear of inevitability. The fear that comes when you realize the moment you've been preparing for is no longer in the future. It is here, it has arrived, and nothing about it looks the way you imagined it would. Jesus in episode 1 carries himself with a stillness that is almost unbearable to watch. There's no performance in his presence, no heroic posturing, no attempt to reassure the people around him with easy comfort. He knows. He has always known. But now that knowing exists in full clarity, and it shapes every word he speaks, every glance he offers, every silence he allows to stretch beyond what feels comfortable. His patience in these moments is not passive. It is chosen, deliberate. The weight of what he is walking toward sits on him visibly, not as weakness, but as full awareness. Watching him in episode 1 is watching someone face the cost of every decision they have ever made and choose to pay it anyway. What episode 1 establishes above everything else is that season 6 has no interest in making this story easy to receive. The first episode is not a warm re-entry into a beloved world. It is a confrontation with where that world has arrived. Every scene is constructed with precision, every pause is intentional, and every quiet moment carries more emotional weight than most shows deliver in an entire season. This is not storytelling designed to entertain at a safe distance. This is storytelling that reaches across the screen, takes hold of you, and refuses to let you watch from anywhere but the center of it. Episode 1 makes one thing unmistakably clear from its opening minutes. The Chosen Season 6 is not here to make you feel good, it is here to make you feel everything. There is a specific kind of tension that Episode 1 builds that has nothing to do with action or conflict in any conventional sense. It is the tension of proximity. The feeling that something enormous is standing just outside the frame of every scene, just beyond the edge of every conversation, just behind the eyes of every person on screen. You can feel it pressing in. You can feel it in the way characters speak to each other, with a care that feels almost like goodbye. You can feel it in the way certain moments are allowed to linger far longer than comfort would suggest. Episode 1 is soaked in this tension, and the remarkable thing is that it never tries to release it. It holds it, deliberately, mercilessly, because the story it is telling demands that you carry that weight alongside the people carrying it on screen. The relationship between Jesus and his closest followers enters entirely new territory in this episode. What existed before as devotion now reveals itself to be something more complicated, more fragile, and more honest. The disciples love him. That has never been in question. But love in season 6 is no longer simple. It is love pressed against fear. Love that wants to protect but cannot. Love that wants to understand but keeps arriving at the edges of its own capacity. You see this in the small moments between characters. A hand on a shoulder that stays a second too long. A question asked and then abandoned before the answer comes. A look exchanged across a room that says, everything neither person is ready to speak aloud. These are not dramatic gestures. They are the quiet devastation of people who know that something is ending and are powerless to stop it. One of the most striking choices episode 1 makes is how it handles the people on the outside of Jesus' circle. The political and religious forces that have been circling throughout previous seasons are no longer distant threats. In episode 1, they feel close, present. Their presence doesn't announce itself with villainous clarity. It arrives the way real danger often does, dressed in protocol and procedure, in meetings and deliberations, in the careful language of people who have decided what they are going to do, but have not yet finished constructing the justification for doing it. This is one of the most unsettling aspects of the episode. The machinery of injustice does not look broken or chaotic. It looks organized, it looks official, and that familiarity is deeply disturbing. There is a scene in episode 1, and you will know it when it arrives, where silence becomes the most powerful storytelling tool the show has ever deployed. No music, no movement, just a face and the weight of what that face is holding. In that silence, the entire emotional architecture of season 6 is revealed. This is not a season about miracles. It is not a season about healing or feeding multitudes or turning water into wine. Those seasons have already been told. This season is about what comes after all of that, what it costs, what it demands, what it takes from the people who were there, who believed, who followed, and who now find themselves standing at the edge of something they cannot survive without being permanently changed by. That silence holds all of it, and it doesn't let go. What episode 1 understands and what makes it so devastating to watch is that grief doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of an ordinary moment and changes the temperature of everything around it. You feel this throughout the episode. A conversation that begins simply and then slowly, without warning, becomes something else entirely. A scene that looks unremarkable on the surface but carries an undercurrent so strong that by the time it ends, you realize you've been holding your breath. The Chosen has always been skilled at emotional nuance, but season 6. Episode 1 operates at a level that feels categorically different. It is not trying to move you. It is trying to break you open slowly, carefully, and with complete intention. Because only when you are open can the truth of this story reach the place it is actually meant to reach. By the midpoint of episode 1, something becomes clear that no amount of preparation could have fully readied you for. The Chosen season 6 is not operating on the same emotional frequency as anything that came before it. It is not louder. It is not faster. It is not more dramatic in any conventional sense. It is deeper. It has descended to a level of honesty that the previous seasons were always moving toward, but never quite reached. And now that it is here, now that the story has arrived at this depth, there is no pretending that what you are watching is comfortable. There is no layer of entertainment softening the edges. What episode 1 delivers in its middle section is something closer to testimony than television. And testimony, by its very nature, demands something from the person receiving it. The cinematography in episode 1 deserves its own conversation because it is doing something that most viewers will feel before they consciously notice. The camera is not in a hurry. It does not cut away when a face becomes difficult to look at. It does not reach for movement or spectacle to carry scenes that are otherwise still. Instead, it stays. It holds. It lets the human face do what the human face has always been the most powerful storytelling instrument available to do. And what these faces are saying in episode 1 is extraordinary. You can read entire chapters of internal experience in a single held shot, confusion and devotion occupying the same expression simultaneously, hope and dread sharing the same pair of eyes. The camera trusts its actors completely, and that trust produces moments of visual storytelling that are more emotionally articulate than any line of dialogue could be. There is also something profoundly important happening in the way episode 1 treats time. This episode does not feel rushed. It does not feel padded. It feels exactly as long as it needs to be, which in the world of modern streaming is itself a radical choice. Every scene is given the space to exist fully before the story moves on. And that space is where the emotion lives. Not in the peaks, not in the dramatic confrontations, but in the in-between moments. The pause before an answer, the breath before a decision, the silence after something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Season 6 has clearly made the decision that these in-between moments are not filler. They are the story. They are where the truth of what these characters are experiencing actually lives. And by honoring them instead of trimming them, Episode 1 creates an emotional texture that is unlike anything this series has produced before. What also emerges powerfully in this middle section of the episode is a portrait of leadership under unbearable pressure. The people who have been looked to for guidance, for steadiness, for answers are themselves running out of answers. And the episode does not treat this as failure. It treats it as reality. There is a particular kind of loneliness that belongs to a leader who has reached the edge of what they know. And Episode 1 portrays that loneliness with unflinching honesty. It does not offer resolution. It does not provide a moment where strength is summoned and doubt is overcome and confidence is restored. Instead, it allows the uncertainty to remain. It allows the weight to stay exactly where it is, because that is what actually happened. And Season 6 has committed, above all else, to what actually happened. Perhaps the most quietly radical thing Episode 1 does in its middle section is refuse to let the audience feel superior to any character on screen. Every person making a difficult decision, every person retreating into fear, every person failing to rise to the moment they are standing inside is portrayed with enough context and enough humanity that judgment becomes impossible. You understand why each person does what they do. You feel the fear that drives the silence. You feel the love that makes the helplessness so devastating. You feel the weight of a world that is moving towards something irreversible and carrying everyone in it along, regardless of whether they are ready. Episode 1 does not ask you to judge these people. It asks you to recognize them. And in recognizing them, to recognize something about what it means to be human in the presence of something larger than humanity. There is something happening beneath the surface of Episode 1 that takes time to fully identify. It is not in any single scene or any single line of dialogue. It is in the accumulation, the slow, steady buildup of moments that individually feel manageable, but collectively become something almost impossible to hold. By the time you reach the middle of this episode, you realize that The Chosen Season 6 has been doing something very specific and very deliberate. It has been closing doors, quietly, one by one, without announcement, without ceremony. Paths that seemed open in previous seasons are no longer open. Options that once existed have disappeared, and what remains is a single, unavoidable road forward. The story has narrowed to a point, and that point is unbearable. The way Episode 1 handles Mary is one of the most quietly devastating things this season does. She does not need speeches or dramatic declarations. Her presence alone communicates everything. There is a particular kind of grief that belongs only to a mother, and the episode captures it without ever over-explaining it. You see it in the way she watches, in the way she listens to conversations she cannot interrupt, in the way she carries herself through scenes where others are still processing what she has already accepted. She is not broken, she is not collapsing, she is enduring, and that endurance is more painful to witness than any breakdown could ever be. The episode understands that the most devastating grief is often the quietest, the kind that has no audience, the kind that simply continues, relentlessly, without relief. What Episode 1 also begins to excavate is the fracture lines that have always existed within the group of disciples, but were held together by momentum and mission and the daily presence of something larger than themselves. Now, under the pressure of what is unfolding, those fracture lines become visible, not through argument or confrontation, but through the subtle ways people begin to move differently around each other, the way trust becomes a little more guarded, the way certainty gives way to something quieter and less stable. These are not dramatic betrayals. They are the small human failures that happen when fear enters a space and begins to rearrange everything. Season 6 is not interested in painting its characters as either heroes or cowards. It is interested in showing what ordinary people do when they are asked to carry something extraordinary. And the answer in Episode 1 is complicated and honest and deeply human. The episode also spends significant time in the uncomfortable space between belief and doubt. This is not new territory for The Chosen, but Season 6 handles it differently. In earlier seasons, doubt was something that visited characters and then was resolved, usually through an encounter or a miracle or a quiet moment of renewed clarity. In Episode 1, doubt does not resolve. It sits. It stays. It occupies the same space as faith without displacing it, and that coexistence is far more honest and far more difficult to watch than any clean resolution would be. The disciples are not losing their faith, but their faith is being tested in ways that have no easy language. It is being stretched across a distance that no previous experience prepared them for. And episode 1 refuses to offer them, or you, any shortcut through that distance. One of the most powerful things episode 1 does is force the audience to sit with their own response to what they are watching. There are moments in this episode where you will feel the impulse to look away, not because the content is graphic, but because it is true, because it reflects something about suffering and sacrifice and the cost of love that is uncomfortable to confront directly. The show does not rush those moments. It does not cut away to something easier. It stays exactly where it is and waits for you to stay with it. That patience is both a creative choice and a kind of demand. Season 6, Episode 1 is asking something of its audience that most television never asks. It is asking you to be fully present for something painful without the promise of immediate comfort on the other side. And in that ask, it reveals exactly what kind of season this is going to be. By the time Episode 1 moves toward its final moments, something has changed in you as a viewer. You can feel it. It is not the same feeling you carried into the episode. Something has shifted, settled deeper, become heavier in a way that doesn't lift when the scene ends. This is what the best storytelling does. It doesn't just play out in front of you, it moves through you. And episode 1 of season 6 does this with a precision and an intentionality that is rare in any medium, let alone television. The final stretch of this episode is not designed to excite you. It is not building toward a cliffhanger or a reveal, engineered to make you hungry for the next episode. It is building toward a truth. A quiet, devastating, unavoidable truth that has been present in every scene from the very first minute. And when it arrives, it doesn't announce itself. It simply lands and stays. What the closing moments of episode 1 make undeniably clear is that The Chosen Season 6 has committed to something most storytelling refuses to commit to. It has committed to the full weight of this story. Not a curated version, not a softened version designed to leave audiences feeling inspired and comfortable on their way out the door. The full weight. The kind of weight that the people who actually lived this story carried without the benefit of knowing how it ended. That is what makes these final moments so extraordinary. For a brief, powerful stretch of time, the show removes the safety net of hindsight. You are not watching history. You are standing inside it, beside people who are terrified, who are faithful, who are human in every painful and beautiful sense of that word, and who have no idea what tomorrow looks like. There is a moment near the end of episode 1 that will stay with you. You will carry it out of the episode and into your day, and it will surface unexpectedly hours later when you are not thinking about it. It is not a loud moment. It does not rely on score or cinematography or any of the tools shows typically use to signal importance. It is simply a person, a look, a breath, and the enormous silence that follows. In that silence, Season 6 tells you everything you need to know about what it is, not a celebration, not an inspiration, a witness. Season 6 has appointed itself a witness to the most painful chapter of this story, and it takes that appointment with a seriousness and a reverence that is almost overwhelming to sit with. That moment near the end of episode 1 is where that appointment is made official. What episode 1 ultimately leaves you with is not resolution. It is not comfort. It is not even hope in any conventional sense. What it leaves you with is presence. The feeling of having been genuinely inside a moment that mattered. The feeling that what you just watched was not constructed for entertainment, but for truth. That is an extraordinarily rare thing for a television episode to achieve. And the fact that The Chosen Season 6 achieves it in its very first episode says everything about what this season intends to be. This is not a show coasting on its own success or playing it safe with a beloved audience. This is a show that has looked at the most important part of its story and decided to honor it completely without flinching, without softening, and without apology. That decision is evident in every frame of episode 1, and it is why this season is going to matter in a way that very few seasons of television ever do. Season 6 has only just begun, and already it has made something clear that will carry through every episode that follows. This story is not here to make you feel better about the world. It is here to make you feel the world more honestly. It is here to strip away the comfortable distance that time and familiarity have placed between you and these events, and to put you back inside them, fully, uncomfortably, truthfully. Episode 1 is the beginning of that process, and if this first episode is any indication of what is coming, then what is coming is going to be one of the most powerful, most painful, and most necessary viewing experiences this series has ever produced. If this episode moved you, if it unsettled you, if it left you sitting in silence when it ended and not quite ready to move on, then you already understand what Season 6 is, and you are not ready for what comes next. Neither am I. but that is exactly why we have to keep watching. If this video reached something in you, leave a comment below and tell me what moment hit you hardest. If you are following this season and you don't want to miss a single breakdown, subscribe now and turn on notifications because every episode of Season 6 deserves this conversation. And if you know someone who needs to see this story told this honestly, share this video with them. This season is not meant to be experienced alone.